the leaps that it's taken, from, as you said, back in 2023, it used to be, in comparison to now, really, really bad. Back then it was unbelievable, but now if you went back to that version then, you'd be like, oh, this is awful, I wouldn't even use it anymore. So it's crazy, like, compared to what, the differences since then. I think it's a win-win across the board, to be honest.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the ProfileTree podcast. Today in this episode, we're going to talk about the new update that just came very recently, the ChatGPT, which is 5.1. And we're joined here with David and Dylan. David is our lead developer, background in software engineering, and Dylan is our digital strategist with a background in design, development, and everything else, internet marketing. So let's start off with a breakdown of the new update. What exactly is new in 5.1? Who wants to take that? David?
Yeah, so ChatGPT 5.1 is the first new iteration of ChatGPT 5. It comes very quickly after ChatGPT 5 came out. So that came out in August this year. We're now in November and it's already released this surprise brand new model. So if anything, that's a big indicator that AI is starting to accelerate, because whenever we had ChatGPT 4, the next iteration of that took a lot longer than what we're seeing here today. The 5.1, the big difference, it does seem like a small upgrade, but it is actually quite a lot going on. And the main thing is it's smarter behaviour. So it's not maybe flashy features that you would normally expect with OpenAI with a lot of their models, but it's a lot more better at reasoning, and it thinks a lot more before it speaks to you. So that means it's kind of going to stop hallucinating, and it's more natural and human-like with the communication. Now, obviously, with ChatGPT nowadays or any AI model, the iterations are small because it's kind of already made that big leap. But the big thing is the new model, 5.1, people are likening it to what ChatGPT 4 was in terms of the way it was communicating, and also it's more human-like, and also it doesn't give as much fluff. So it doesn't, sometimes you have to prompt and then there's like a lot of text before your actual answer. It tries to give you just what you need and what you want, and also in doing that, sounding like a person and not a textbook. So yeah, those are probably the main changes. There's obviously other things like it's better at the, performance for coding and math and workflows and any of the logic heavy tasks that you would typically use ChatGPT 4 as well. So it obviously improved on those aspects too. And I'm sure OpenAI have launched some benchmarks that you can probably look up and see how they've improved in those aspects. But for the most part, the biggest thing is that it's more user friendly. Like, it's more talking like a human, it's more accurate, it's more reliable. I don't know if that's a good thing, talking more like a human, but it's more reliable, it's more accurate, and it's more snappy. So it's going to reply and try and get you the answer you want. And sometimes if it needs to, it will think about it longer. So it's more about giving you the quality rather than the quantity right there and then. So for you, the business, what does that mean for you? Like from 5.1, it basically means that when you use ChatGPT now, it's going to be slightly better than what you thought it was before. So if anything, it's definitely an upgrade. In terms of real world tests, Dylan, I think you had some in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to sort of reiterate over some of the things that you had talked about, I think the drawback of ChatGPT, I wouldn't say there's many issues with it, given how convenient it is for everything. But I guess the biggest drawback was always it sort of felt like it was making things up if you didn't give it enough information. So obviously, given that we're in the SEO world, we use it a lot for, creating content for websites, helping people create content for their social media, things like that. And if you didn't give it enough information and you made it think about what it needed to write, it started to go off on a waffle, and it would have just went on and on and on. And sometimes that was a really bad thing for especially marketing and the SEO side, because we were obviously maybe giving it things like keywords, and it would have basically took those keywords and read about them, but it would have added on another maybe 50% of sort of bloat into the response. And sometimes what was happening there is the information that was given wasn't factually correct. And obviously with certain industries, there's going to be lots of policies and references to facts, etc. And that was causing a lot of issues. So there was still a lot of, I guess with the version 5, there was a lot of checks that we still had to do. And I guess that's still a good thing, because you don't want want, obviously, everything to be AI, just copy paste and leave it at that. You still want to have that sort of human factor, but that was probably one of the biggest things that I had noticed as well. Even moving on to the more design stuff. So I would utilize ChatGPT for coming up with sort of logo concepts and things like that, and the graphics design point of view. And again, if you give it sort of an idea, it didn't really understand it, where I have actually noticed a massive difference over the last sort of day or two with that 5.1 version. It just seems to understand what you're asking for better. And even when I'm inputting images to it to sort of, analyze and sort of take it as an example, it seems to be giving me a more accurate response of what that image actually is, which, as you said, David, this is not a big fancy update to it. It's a very, very, well, in ChatGPT and OpenAI's standards, it's a very minor change. But from those a couple of things that I had mentioned, those are the initial points that I've started to notice. I feel like you mentioned there the human factor. I definitely think there is more of a human sort of response with it. Content for websites, content for social media, you still want it to sound like you don't want it to sound robotic, which I think was one of the biggest issues with the early versions of Chat. It was very Americanized, which for us is obviously a problem with spellings, etc. But I do think, especially with this version, it was good with 5, but with this version, I do see a massive increase in sort of the human factor when it's producing its responses.
I suppose that's good for a number of reasons. If you're writing articles through using ChatGPT, you want the human aspect, because people don't want to be reading an article that sounds like it's been pumped out of a robot.
Yeah.
You want to have that connection with whatever you're reading. You want it to sound like another human has written your content for you. And it's crazy to think that this all started in November 30th of November 2022, and we're already on 5.1, around 3 years later. And there's things I've seen about this version of 5.1, like rule following, for example. Understanding the rules. ChatGPT 5 understood it, but sometimes it still broke it, whereas 5.1, we're getting immediate responses and it's producing it in exactly 6 words, whereas beforehand it was doing its own thing sometimes.
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of the most frustrating things about it, is it's such a smart thing. Obviously AI is very intelligent, and when you consider all the things it can do, and I'm with you there, Chris, if I maybe ask it for, give me a 1,000-word article, it's given me a 500-word article or a 1,500-word article, which I know is not a major issue, and it's, first world problems and all that. But at the same time, you whatever you're asking for, you kind of relying on getting it back. And that's another thing, because people are so trustworthy of it now in terms of the quality of work it's given. You probably wouldn't check the word count. I do check it because I've been caught a few times with it, but I do think this version is definitely a lot better. I think it just thinks more. I think it's sort of like, back when you're in school, you're always told to read the question twice. I feel like that's exactly what ChatGPT is doing. It's sort of reading your question before it just goes off in a spill. Even from, a creative side, I do think it is being a bit more creative. I think design with AI is still sort of lagging a little bit behind, but I do think this has a bit more of a creative spark to it, which is obviously good for the industry that we're all in.
Yeah, and that kind of leads nicely into what is the user impact and what does that mean for creators, for students, for developers, for businesses. Looking at the new update, we get more natural explanations, easier for brainstorming and clearer drafts. You mentioned there about a sense check. We used to ask it, do you understand the task at hand? And then it would give you a wee summary. Whereas now it's doing that without us having to prompt it. Better tone matching. If you're asking it for specific tones, it'll help craft content that sounds more human and avoiding that textbook jargon. That's exactly what we need as creators. Sometimes for SEO, you're looking to create an article that's 1,000 words long or 1,500 words long, but you want it to understand that in that article, you have to use these 50 keyword phrases or whatever document that you attach to feed it to give it the prompt on that information. What does it mean for students if you're learning? And when I say students, I don't just mean like university level students. I mean us as people who learn as they work at the same time as well, having to teach ourselves. It's more accurate at step-by-step reasoning or guidance. It asks for clarification instead of just hallucinating some answers. And we say hallucinating, that's the term for anyone listening, used to describe what ChatGPT does whenever it decides to go into a world of its own.
It definitely used to do that more times than ever. And I was actually just going to ask you, David, just in terms, from the programming side of it. Obviously, we all sort of have a background in software development, but one of the things you're always taught is to reduce the amount of bloat and make sure your code is scalable. And Chris, you sort of mentioned there about the hallucinating with ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Do you feel like it did do that before with code and sort of made it that instead of writing 2 lines, it read 10 lines for something that could have been done in a lot less? Is that something you're noticing, David?
Yeah, so sometimes it does overcomplicate it. For a small problem, you don't really need 10 lines of code, you only need 2 lines to, solve the problem. And obviously more lines of code, more things you need to maintain. But probably the biggest one for me with the new update I've noticed is it doesn't give you as much like fluff as I call it, basically at the start. Because that really used to frustrate me because you'd be scrolling down to get into the answer you actually want. So that's probably the biggest thing that I've noticed. And then also the instructions, it's a lot better too. So if I was, for example, writing a bit of code that was going to display the blog post date, if I said, I need it to be in this date format in the past, that maybe would have not understood what I meant or would have asked for further clarification. Whereas now it's a lot more straight to the point and it only edits that bit as well, which is a big thing. Before you have to just show all the code again, and then you're sort of just needing to get the bit you need. So I've noticed that being a bit of an improvement there anyway in the coding aspect.
Yeah. And I guess from even OpenAI side, obviously these things are, huge to try and run, energy wise. So they're probably also considering the better quality response it gives with the less, sort of jargon and fluff, as you've called it, the better it's going to be for it. Because obviously that's one of the concerns at the minute with AI is how much energy it consumes, obviously from a sustainability impact as well. So I guess, they're going to continue to, make everything more, and that's the thing. Where are we going to go? This is obviously only version 5. 5 years down the line, we could be in version 10, version 20, you don't know where we're going. And the leaps that it's taken, from, as you said, Chris, back in 2023, it used to be, in comparison to now, really, really bad. Back then it was unbelievable, but now if you went back to that version then, you'd be like, oh, this is awful. I wouldn't even use it anymore. So it's crazy, like compared to what, the differences since then.
What, like, see, even for us as an agency or other businesses that we're working with, if you look at how that update, the small update that it is, impacts them, as you say as well, for the softwares themselves, like they want to cut down all the jargon, they want to cut down bad responses, they want to cut, because that is just data storage, and it's getting wiped out. And think of the amount of people using chat every day. But this update then, more reliable outputs, reduces time spent correcting or reprompting, and that's a big thing for us, because even though AI is helping us save a lot of time with simple tasks, that you probably cutting down like hours of time in some places, but again, just getting more productive with the prompting is even going to cut it down less. Improved emotional intelligence helps us with customer facing messaging as well. So you get for me, how that actually translates then, instead of that just being a title, how that translates into real life. Say I'm writing a script for a video, and I want this script to be really impactful for the client because their product is something that they've spent their entire career building maybe. So it's already a super product. We need to get a super message out there, something that's going to be emotional, something that's going to be impactful and relatable to other humans. So getting better responses will help us with our content. But where else does this impact people?
I think just the general, the digital industry, I think any business that runs on any sort of digital platform or they use any sort of digital software, I mean, I think it's going to have a direct impact in everything. Back in when, we were all at school, it was always, learn IT, computers, all that sort of thing. I think now it's sort of shifting towards, learn how to use AI, learn how to use it effectively, because it is all about it being efficient, and there's always all these rumors where it's going to replace this and etc. It will never replace this. But what we need to do is learn how to live with it properly and how to utilize it. I think from us in a marketing world, so we've already mentioned the SEO impact it has. From your side, Chris, the video, obviously very, very good for scripting and things like that. David, from your side, programming, and back to what I mentioned earlier on, I think with the more these versions sort of come out, the more efficient we'll get, because I think we all are sort of double checking it at the minute, because of the bloats and the sort of the unnecessary and maybe non-factual stuff that sort of adds in. I think as that gets better, it will literally be ask, copy, paste, that sort of thing. And yes, that will take the human factor out of it a little bit more, which is obviously what we don't want to do. But when we're thinking of efficiency and running businesses efficiently, obviously the less time spent, the more time there is for making money and improving the business. So I think from a business point of view, this is only a bigger benefit, and also from a sort of a personal, or what we all use it for point of view, I think it's a win-win across the board, to be honest.
I agree completely. Well, that sort of does it for this episode then. We've looked at the impacts of the new update, and again, anyone out there who's listening or watching, do reach out to us in the comment section. We're here in a normal working week. For anyone who wants to reach out, ask us questions, we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Or if you've any queries around getting help with using AI or training, do reach out to us as well, because we offer this as one of our services. So do like, subscribe, and we'll be in touch with you in the next video. Thanks for watching.